Good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Doug Brunke. I am the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. We've had the good fortune to be connected to Rich Wolverton, who's been a member of Global Chamber through his firm, which is Grow Food Service LLC. And he's been involved in the food industry for many years. Really appreciate Rich's expertise, his knowledge of the food industry. As many of our members know, this is a critical component within Global Chamber, this market segment around the world. There's a lot going on, whether it's food and beverage or whether it's the ag tech side, all the way through the delivery of food. We're going to be talking mainly today about the food service area. And in fact, the Globinar is called Food Service and Distribution in the US. Rich, we really appreciate your expertise. Thank you for taking the time to share with us today. We look forward to learning more. Please go ahead. And I presume that there'll be some time for Q&A as well in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Doug. It's a pleasure to do this. It's a lot of fun for myself and my partners, as you know, we love sharing information on this part of the industry. As Doug said, my name is Rich Wolverton. I come from my first half of my career was in food sales. Second half was in working for a broadline food service distributor, one of the biggest in the country. They got swallowed up by one of the biggest, bigger in the country. And so experience with looking at food distribution from many points. My two partners, Scott Schmitz, Pam Panuccio, are on the phone. We're all located in the US. Scott's in Colorado, Pam's in Arizona, I'm in Northern California. And we work with companies, emerging companies, to help them get their brands established in food service distribution. So we'll go through this. This is a 25-minute presentation, and then would love the questions. Write them down, put them in the chat, and we can get to those at the end. So I titled this "Don't Go In Blind." So we've worked with a lot of companies, and a lot of them think, hey, I know how to make a salsa, I know how to make banana bread, whatever, and I'm going to go sell it in food service. And they have no idea what they're doing and the stumbling blocks that can come along the way. And so based on our experience of working both sides of broadline food service distribution, the sales side and the category management side, we're able to help folks navigate these paths and help these emerging brands establish themselves in the proper markets. And okay, give me half a second. Yeah. And that didn't change. Okay.
Just hit page down, Rich. Page
down. Sorry, it's the simple stuff. There we go. Thank you, Scott. It's
no worries.
For the 101. Thought it'd be important. The terminology in every industry is a little bit different. So let's go over some of the terminology. So broadline food service distributor. Broadline means they handle everything, the food products, of course. We call it disposables, which are all the things you throw away, things made from plastic, paper, aluminum that are used. It'll be equipment, cleaning, it's everything. So that's the broadline part of it. Food service means we're addressing the specific food service industry, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Distributor, hopefully, is obvious. Food service operator, so we call them operators, and because it's more than just restaurants. And you look at it, it could obviously be a restaurant, it could be quick serve, it could be a chain, it could be an independent restaurant where it's only 1 or 2 units, hospitals, work cafeterias, schools. So it's broad, very broad. And think of food away from home is another way to look at that. The term DSR, distributor sales representative, and they get called other things, but these are the guys out working with the operators to help them get the proper orders, to get the proper item selection, all the details worked out. GS1 is pretty interesting. It's become a critical part of what we do. GS1 are, as you can see, the standards for item information. This includes item images, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, along with the item information. And what's happened with GS1 is, as Cisco US, and now there's a dozen platforms out there that smaller distributors use, these images are really critical because operators are now ordering product from online order guides. And this is the basis for how your item appears to these customers, these operators, when they're ordering. And GDSN, Global Data Synchronization Network, this is where the information is stored. If you had asked me 6-8 months ago, I'd say this would absolutely be a critical part of the program. I'm less convinced of that. There's other ways to get your information out. So we look at what's the size of the prize in food service in the United States. And what I found in looking for this number is it's hard to grab. So what I did find is food service in certain segments in 2024 is expected to be 820 billion. So if we look, just as you can see there, QSR, quick serve restaurants, full serve restaurants, cafes, bars and grills, and cloud restaurants. So just, and then you look down below at food service segments, you can see we're only tapping one of these. So this is easily, well over $1 trillion business. And it makes it a huge opportunity. About half the food consumed in the US is consumed away from home. So it's a huge opportunity. You look at schools, we talk K through 12, kindergarten through grade 12, college and university, and you'll hear C&U thrown around. You can see where that comes from. Healthcare and senior living obviously becoming much more important in the United States as we have an aging population. The B&I, business and industry cafeterias, pre-COVID was huge, and it's coming back. The military, you think about all these folks that eating in the mess halls, et cetera, the officers clubs, hospitality, so eating at hotels, you're away from home. Cruises, Department of Corrections, that gets included in this also. So food service, very, very large group of companies or segments. So Pam, are you going to cover this one?
No, I'm doing pricing.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
But I can do this if you'd like.
Oh, no, I got her.
Okay.
So to get ready for food service, you obviously have to have a go-to-market strategy. If you just go at it and follow what looks like a good path without a plan, you're going to waste a lot of time, money, effort. So having a strong go-to-market strategy, how you're going to attack the market, and then be flexible from there. You need to make sure you're complying with the government regulations. So USDA, FDA, of course, and now FSMA, Food Safety Modernization Act 204. That's a big deal, and it's coming fast. So we need to be ready for that. And the packaging and labeling need to be right for the US and legible, and there's a lot of concerns about that. So that's part of what we help folks with. When it comes to the GS1 standards, one of the important parts of it, if you look at the bottom of this page, there's 4 images on scallops. And these images comply with GS1 standards. And I've talked to folks that tried to do this on their own, and not that it's impossible, but it's much more difficult than you'd think. And you can get these images fairly inexpensively. And when you get this PowerPoint, you can see I've got GS1 highlighted. Food Marketing Solutions does these images. They do them for our clients, and they're going to give a discount if you mention Global Chamber. So if you need to do that, you can follow the link to get to it. But if we look at the first image of the closed case, and you can see that this picture is taken from an interesting angle. Not only the box is turned slightly, but also the shot from above. And all that is important. And you can see there's nothing in the background. It's just a white background. And even when a product is white, like these scallops, it's still a white background. So this isn't necessarily a marketing picture, but it does show the product, and there's no misunderstanding. You know, if you had it on a plate and with a sauce, you know, what are you really selling? You know what you're selling here. But these are 4 of the images required by GS1. EDI, electronic data interchange, again, a critical part if you're a bigger company and how you go to market. If you don't have EDI capabilities, there's ways around it that can work. I saw one yesterday called Clio that can help with that if EDI is critical to your customers. One of the things we see with food service, when people are talking to on their point of sale or their marketing materials, they're talking to consumers and not the right audience for food service. So if you're in food service, your customers are going to be, as we say here, the chefs and the restaurant owners. If you're going bigger, it's a chain buyer or a chain category manager, or it's the distributor category manager. So they have different concerns than a consumer. So you have to make sure you're talking to the chef. And so in marketing materials, distributors want spec sheets along with marketing information, but they want spec sheets. They want to know how you palletize your product. They want all the details, the cube of the case, you know, it's all the detail that's boring, but critical for them setting these items up. And the operators, you know, they may ask, well, what's it cost? You know, that's going to come out of their mouths. And a lot of times, you know, we're tempted to say, well, this is $30 a case. That's not the important number. What's really important is, what does this portion cost me? What do those 5 scallops cost me? And then what can I sell it for? And then figuring out their margin. And there's some creative ways to use that information and make it interesting for operators that intrigues them for the long term. You know, I love to take those numbers and then say, hey, if you sell, you know, 30 plates a week of these scallops at the end of the year with these margins, you're going to make X, because it's in the tens of thousands of dollars. And it becomes very important to the operator when you put it that way. You need to understand logistics to your distributor. So we've talked to a lot of folks that go, oh, our customers all pick up. And that's great if you want to stay small. But if you want to grow, you're going to need to know what it costs to get the products from your warehouse to the distributor. And the distributor may choose to pick up still, but if you say, hey, the freight is $1,000 and the distributor can do it in a backhaul with a truck, which means they have a truck that has gone and delivered to a certain point, then they can send that truck to pick up your product and backhaul it to their distribution center. So if you say it's $1,000 and they can do it for $800, that's an income opportunity for the distributor. So they'll look at that $200 as additional income. They'll pick it up themselves and make that work. And ongoing sales support, you have to understand, in the United States, you know, a distributor at a certain location may have 50 or 100 salespeople, DSRs, but that doesn't mean they're going to go out and focus on your product. They've got thousands of products to sell, and you know, it still takes that concerted effort to get out and make it work. You'll find some champions at a distributor that'll work for you, but you need to be prepared to do this work either yourself, through a broker, some method. And then costing and pricing. We'll get into this a little bit later, but you absolutely have to understand what things cost you and how you price things. You need to understand all the hidden costs in doing business, or end of the day, you're not making much money. We talked to a lady recently who's doing a couple $1 million in sales, but she has one client who's screwed her down on price so much. She's only making 40 grand a year, and she doesn't understand her pricing. So and it's costing her. So when we talk broadline food service distributors in the US, there's three different factors here I think you need to understand. One is there's the big distributors, Cisco, US Foods, and everybody's heard of them. Cisco is number one. They're twice the size of US Foods, who's much bigger than the next one. And then I think it's important. There's 1,000 distributors in the United States, food service distributors. So how do you reach these folks? And you do it through the organizations that they belong to. So IMA, upper right corner, Independent Marketing Alliance, is an association of a handful of companies, including Performance Food Group, Shamrock Foods, and our company that Scott, Pam, and I worked for was a member of that. We're very familiar with IMA, and before we got bought by US Foods. So that's a good, strong association. Unipro is impressive, based in Atlanta. They've got over 400 distributors, and not just in the US, also Canada, Caribbean, other places. So it's, again, an association of these distributors. Gordon Food Service, a big factor in the eastern half of the US and also in Canada. You have Golbon, and they're a company out of Boise, Idaho, that's an association of 100 or so distributors. Frosty Acres, they're down in Georgia. And again, a couple hundred distributors that belong to that. So there's a lot of distributors. And if you don't have a system to go approach all this, you're going to drive yourself a little bit crazy. And then the bottom left corner, I separated out the major, we call them systems houses. So Sigma, it's part of Cisco, as you can see. And Sigma just deals with chains. That's all they do. So the bigger chains, and they work at being very efficient. There's no extra services. You, as an operator, you don't get help working on your menu, working on the front of the house or back of the house flow that you would get if you're an independent. You just get your products delivered. It's absolutely just drayage, and they're very efficient at it. GSF, same thing. McLean is a very large convenience store distributor that grew into doing systems distribution. So what does the supply chain look like in the United States? And I did this based on product being exported to the US. And you get it exported, you get it on the ship, you get it to the US, you get it cleared, FDA, USDA, whatever it has to clear. Then it gets transported to your public storage. It could be cold storage, just regular storage, but this is your distribution center. And then the product sits there for a while, especially if you're importing. You have to think about the costs of storage there, storage and handling. Then you receive an order from your distributor, so it gets transported again to the broadline, or it could be a specialty food service distributor. And they'll bring in the product, they have their safety stock, and they sit on it for a bit. Then it gets transported to the food service operator, who then prepares a meal for the consumer. Yeah. And Scott's going to cover this part because of his expertise in sales.
Thanks, Rich. So in my mind, I think this is where the fun begins, but this can be also intimidating for entrepreneurs and people that aren't comfortable in putting themselves out there and selling product. So, but at the end of the day, this is a very, very important piece to that final step. Having a great product, having the supply chain figured out, and everything Rich talked about earlier. This is really the last step to get your product out into the market and selling. That's how you generate revenue and ultimately generate profits. So there's a couple of different ways that I'll speak to today, and hopefully you have more questions in the Q&A after we're done. But I want you to think about, are you going to, if you can go out and get a good customer, which would be a customer-facing sales plan, to where you go out and you might get a large restaurant or a large chain, or maybe a school, or you might sell to the military, or whatever the case may be. If you can start and you have that good anchor customer, your path into distribution becomes much, much easier when you've already done that piece of it. Sometimes that's not possible. And so you have to have a plan that would be more distributor facing. And that would include things that you would ask yourself, okay, what value does my product bring to the market? What am I trying to solve? How does my product work in the back of a restaurant, in the kitchen? How does it fit in a school, or in senior living, or a hospital, or the military? Those are questions you want to ask yourself, and make sure before you get too far ahead of yourself that you've got that piece figured out, that go-to-market strategy, so it's easily explained. And if you're not out there doing it yourself, that you can turn it over to a broker, or Rich had mentioned that distributor sales rep that works for a distributor, that it's something they can get excited about, and they can explain it to their customers out in the market. So next slide, Rich. So again, where do I start selling? So I want to start this by saying, I want you to draw your attention to the bottom of the screen where it says the dream is free, but the hustle is sold separately. So Rich grabbed this from a potential client of ours that is an entrepreneur, great products, is probably ultimately going to do very, very well out in the food service segment. But this really got our attention, and it hits close to home. Dreaming all day is great. That's where entrepreneurs come up with their great ideas. But they're really, at the end of the day, there's no substitute for the hustle to get out there and sell your product. So what I'm talking about here is more about the distributor and how you can grow your business. But this is really, really an important step. And I touched on a couple of the points on the prior slide. But Rich talked about the pricing. This is really an important piece to really understand your cost, and more importantly, how the distributor pricing works before you go to the distributor and start quoting them your cost and pricing. Or if you're out in the field and you're talking directly to customers, really understanding, so who may distribute your product for you, and make that connection ahead of time. So when you're talking about cost and pricing, that it's more accurate, because it's always easier to come down. It's always very, very difficult to go up in your pricing. The distributor sales rep, DSR, is the acronym for that. Can you do training? If you can, that's great. If you cannot, who could do that for you? With distributors, at a sizable distribution center, so for instance, like Cisco or US Foods, they have close to 100 distribution centers scattered across the whole country. And in each one of those, there's DSRs. And it could be 50, it could be 100 of them. But if you can train DSRs to go out and represent your product, you can gain a lot of traction. But remember, Rich mentioned this earlier, they have 9 to 12,000 other items that they can sell. And so asking yourself the question, what's going to make my product stand out? What value do I bring to the market? Those sorts of things, the problems or the issues that your product could solve for a restaurant or a consumer. If you can get your product to rise to the top, then you'll have a better shot at having success in food service. So I think I'll stop there. Hopefully you got some questions at the end here, and we'd love to talk more about this.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Scott. So throughout the presentation, Rich and Scott's talked about pricing and costing. And this is a very critical component when trying to launch your products out into the marketplace. And whatever angle or approach you take that Scott talked about. So what I'd like to do is take a few minutes and just really understand and outline some of the bigger costs that as you speak to operators, as you engage with distributors, what's expected of you as the manufacturer. And to understand that means that you're going to protect your margins. So like Rich alluded to earlier, if you're talking about the $30 case, you may think to yourself right up front, that's plenty of margin for me. I'd be satisfied in getting my products out at that cost. But once you start looking into the supply chain and understanding what are the various different costs and fees involved, and what's expected of you as the manufacturer, that changes drastically. So we've listed a few on here, some of the bigger ones. GS1, those are the high resolution images that we talked about. Those are expected when you're talking to a distributor, those costs are expected to be taken care of by you, the manufacturer. There's also what's called purchase allowances. There's a lot of other names for them, such as rebates. But this basically is the cost to move your products through the distributor's warehouse and to offset some of their expenses. It's not their margin, but it is something that is probably 95% of the time going to be asked of you as the manufacturer to produce. Without getting into a lot of details, we can, in the next slide, we'll talk about how you can offset that. So that it's not eroding your margins that you originally established for yourself. There's also marketing support for sales promotions. So, with all of these sales associates, there's ways that the organization, a Cisco or a US or any of the distributors, how they incentivize their sales or DSRs to go out and sell your products. And so they put on some pretty hefty promotions out there. And when you participate in these promotions, that's what gets you exposure within that organization. And so there's also a cost associated with that. Think of samples. The DSRs, we're in the food business, right? So DSRs, they want to taste it. They want to, see what it looks like in the box. They want to be able to give the samples to their prospective customer that's interested. Think of when you go to food shows, right? It's all about tasting and sampling the products. That's what's going to sell is the samples. Sometimes distributors will ask or even operators will ask for guaranteed sales. What guaranteed sales is that, hey, if I bring in a pallet of your product and it doesn't sell, are you willing to take it back or willing to discount the product so I can sell through it? So there's that partnership, and they want to make sure that they're not investing on something that's not going to sell. So they're going to ask for your participation in that. As Scott alluded to, there's training for DSRs. There's a lot of DSRs out there. It takes a lot to train them. They've got thousands and thousands of items to be educated on and be able to go out there and speak to it, with confidence. Another couple other components of pricing through the supply chain is going to be service level fees. I wouldn't say all distributors have this in their pricing structure, but service level fees are basically, they hold the vendor accountable. So if a large distributor purchases your products and it's consistent that you can't deliver the quantities, those are lost sales to them, to their customer, to the operator. So they will charge you for those rebates that we talked about at the top. Let's say you had a $5 rebate on your product, and if they don't sell that, or because they can't, because it wasn't delivered, then they will charge you those rebate fees, even though product wasn't delivered. So that's something else to consider. Sometimes there's slotting fees. That's mostly in retail, but not so much in food service distribution. But it needs to be taken into consideration when negotiating with the distributor.
Yeah, how a slotting fee can show up is they say, hey, I'd love to bring your product in. I don't have room in my warehouse. I have this one slot tied up with dead inventory. If you'll pay for that inventory, then you can have that slot. So there's a million terms and lots of ways to get your money.
Yep.
Okay. There we go. So
this is part of it. So think about everything that we just mentioned and how you approach, whether it's the operator or the distributor, what fees are involved, what's going to be expected of you as the manufacturer. It's important to understand, how does that look like all the way through the supply chain to get to the consumer. And so as we go through this, you'll understand why it's very, very important. So as we talked, you have your manufacturer cost, right? So let's just say that's $30 a case. And now you have your margin in that as well, right? So you have the cost to manufacture your product. That's the packaging, the raw materials, your production, all of that. Then you have your margin and what profit is acceptable to you. And so let's just say those two pieces equal $30 per case. That is what's called the FOB price. So it's the cost to come and pick it up at your distribution center from the distributor. Then if it's the freight to get it to the distributor, whether they're picking up or whether you're going to deliver it for them, it's the cost of the freight. That then becomes the distributor's landed cost. And then within that, the distributor has their inside margins. And that becomes the distributor's cost. And so thinking of all of those components that we just talked about on the previous slide, whether it was the purchasing allowances, the marketing, the promotional participation, you've got to make sure that that's part of your manufacturer margin in order to be able to price yourself so that when it ultimately gets to the operator, that you're competitive within your segment of business, whether it's donuts or bakery or cheese or whatever it may be, that you're bringing a value to the operator at the end of the day. And so if you look over to the right, the supply chain continues with the distributor cost basis. So you take that, they have sales margins out to independent restaurants. It's kind of different for each one of their customers, whether depending on the size of volume that they purchase from the distributor. And then the case of handling the charge, and that becomes the cost to the operator. So you can see all the different components from your pricing all the way to the cost to the operator. And typically the operator's menu price is 3 to 4 times the food cost. So these are very important things to make sure that you're understanding of what that's going to be at the very end of the day when that operator is using your products to create their menu costs.
Yeah, again, this is, as I say at the top, it's very oversimplified. There's a lot of details in here, but I think this gives you a good coverage of that. Thanks, Pam. So Cesar mentioned to me that big question is, where do I meet customers? Where do I find the people where I can do the business? And this PowerPoint will get sent out to you, and there's links for all of these. National Restaurant Show, NRA, it's called, in Chicago. It's coming up in May. That's the big dog, and it's a lot. There's thousands of booths, tens of thousands of people. And we'll send this out and you can take a look at it. We're going to the Northwest Food Show. It's up in Portland, Oregon next month with one of our clients, and looking forward to that. The one here that could be a little confusing is chain gangs. And it sounds weird because that's a term used in prisons here in the US. But what this is are the chain restaurants get together. It's a chance for them to socialize, talk over important topics, and also meet new suppliers. And it's a format that I really like and is well run. And then the bottom one that says create, and you can see the word eat in create. They play this up very well. That's run by Nation's Restaurant News. I did that a couple of years ago with a client, and it was a great event. These people were very interested in seeing new products and how they work and exploring how they can put additional things on the menu. But again, I've got all the links here, and when Cesar sends this to you, you'll have all the information. And this is us. There's our contact information again when Cesar sends it out. And I gotta say, if you just want to talk about food service in the US and just have an introductory call, we're open to that. It's an exciting business to be in, and but you need to know the ropes, and that's where we help folks. So that's the presentation. If we have some questions, we'd love to help out on that.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much for the information. Really a how-to. You kind of referred to it, and I think it was you, Rich. And I'll open up for other questions, but I'll kick off the question. So please either raise your hand or be ready to unmute when I ask about that. But the question I had was kind of triggered by something in your slides, Rich, where you were considering how landing companies would be able to navigate through. So how much of your work is with companies outside the US coming into the US? And are there other special considerations that they should be thinking about as they do that?
Yeah, so right now, one of our big clients is Italian. It's a company called Fabri. So it's a 118-year-old Italian company and phenomenal products. Now, they'd already established their distribution warehouses. They just weren't in food service. So we walked them through that. We worked with a pasta company to get them set up. Pam led that project, and we did it all. Here's the dirty laundry side. They'd hired a really flaky guy to work out their logistics into the US. He didn't know what he was doing. And so Pam took that on and worked out the full distribution system. So yeah, can we do that? Yes. Do we know everything about importing product? Absolutely not, but we know who to ask. And that's what saves us we're three folks. We do a great job. We understand how this all works in general, but there's pieces that we don't do. We know what we want to see in a website. We don't do website design. So we refer to others on that. And there's things like that. So if it was importing and something interesting like farmers from Kenya, yes, we would want to talk about that. but there may be pieces where we need to get expert help in certain areas. And we're part of another organization called Datum Advisors that has all that kind of expertise available to people. So yeah, we can easily jump on that.
Fantastic. It seems like it's an essential service. On the US side, are the companies that typically approach you relatively new in the space, or are they more experienced and they just need extra hands? What's your typical client look like?
Yeah, so it's generally emerging brands. They've created a product. They may have products going in retail already at some level, but they don't understand food service. They don't have the right packaging and all that. So we'll help them design the packaging and the case size, all those kinds of details to make sure it has best opportunity for success.
I'd add to that, Rich and Doug, the other piece that's fairly common is those emerging brands that have found their way into retail and want to get into food service distribution. And, a common question is, well, what's the difference? I sell in retail, so I should be able to sell in food service, right? It's logical to think that way. And there's some things that are the same, but it is two totally different industries. Retail is, you have your product on a shelf at, Safeway or Kroger or Whole Foods or something like that. In food service, your audience is different because you're a couple steps away from the consumer. There is a question in the chat from Cliff. Are you open to partner with farmers in Kenya? So I would say that would be worthy of a conversation. We do deal with international customers, so Cliff, if you want to reach out to us after this and we can learn a little bit more about what you're talking about, that would be great.
Cliff is our executive director in Nairobi. So thank you, Cliff, for the question. Cesar, you had asked them to present certain types of information. What's your response to what you saw here today? And did you have either any questions or people in the audience that you want to make sure get involved in the conversation? Oh, Cesar, are you there?
Yeah,
I'm here, yes. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Pamela and Scott. I think I appreciate it, Rich, because you touched on all the points that we discussed probably like a month ago. So it's like we have cases like, let's say Cliff, for instance, he's asking a question now. We have cases from time to time from either members or even contacts outside of the US that they're interested into connecting with these big firms like you mentioned, like Cisco or US Foods. Is that something like your firm can help with? Is that part of the services you can offer, or is there somehow that we can create a roadmap, say, these are the next steps for you, and is your firm part of that roadmap?
Yeah, what we do, I didn't want to turn it into an advertisement for us, but we help folks with all the steps, and we do make it our best to make it easy. If someone calls us up and says, "Hey, here's where I'm at," we all jump on a call with them. It takes about an hour to really start to investigate, and we'll spend an hour with folks and going over where they're at, what they need, and what their gaps are. So if somebody is ready to talk to Cisco or US, yeah, we'll enable that. And then it could be, we look at Cisco US because they're the big dogs, but it could be Unipro is a better option. Or once we understand what they're doing, then we can help direct the business opportunity where it's best handled. And it could be that it's operator first. So if that's the case, then we can help with that also.
And I would just add to that, that I think the biggest value that we bring to the table is each one of us, the three of us, have been in this food service distribution business for over 30 years. So we always say that once you get into the food industry, whether it's retail, food service, whatever it may be, if you're the manufacturer, the distributor, it doesn't matter. You don't get out because we're passionate about food. And so we see a lot of people moving around, whether it's to a manufacturer, to a distributor, to a broker. And so over 30 plus years for each of us, we have those connections, whether that people just move around. And so we continue to stay in contact with them. We have those relationships and we're able to tap into those resources.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
The Hotel California of markets. Once you check in, you can't.
Yeah. But I just want to put a fine point on that, Cesar, that, yes, we do introductions. Yes, we can help with that. With our big client that we mentioned, we're helping them sell product. We're very active in their business right now. We're their sales arm. But people have to be ready too, because when we take and introduce somebody to one of our contacts, one of our business friends, our reputation's right on the line also. And they need to be ready. If someone's not ready, no, we're not going to do an introduction. So I don't want to just make it seem like here's this big opportunity I can just jump right into.
Very good point.
And there's a step back, like when they ask us, that's the question we ask, like, ready important to the user, you're ready. So avoid, it's, or we want to save time for our members for sure. So
yeah.
Is there anything else when it comes to ready? I know FDA is always like on top of the list, but what other points when it comes to even packaging, even marketing, what would be, do you have some key points or key questions that you ask companies from abroad?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, we'll ask if they're open to private label products. So if you have something that's unique, and then you get it in private label, you're giving yourself an advantage. And a lot of people say, no, I just want to push my brand. My brand's the most important thing in the world. And it's kind of tough to talk about someone's baby, but a lot of times you kind of have to say, nobody knows your brand, right? And so would you rather have sales or have your brand out there? And sometimes it becomes that choice. And if you'll take something and put it in a distributor's private label, the good thing that comes out of that is now you have all their DSRs motivated to go sell your product. Because they get incentivized financially to sell private label. And the bosses, trust me, we've all lived this, the bosses will beat on them if they're not selling enough private label. So there's a couple advantages to private label. The obvious one is, hey, I have my brand on this box and I have a certain amount of pride with that as a distributor. From the distributor's point of view, pride goes into it. They like to brag, hey, I have 12,000 items in private label. Oh, you only have 6,000. Oh, look at me. They like to, they make more money typically, not always, but typically on private label. So that's good. They'll pick up an extra point or two. And then the third thing is if you have your private label, like Cisco private label in a restaurant, the competitor can't come in and replace it. If you have Heinz ketchup, which is very prevalent in the United States. If I'm selling it this week as a DSR, Scott comes in from another company the next week, he may sell it because it's a commodity, basically. You put your brand on it, it's not a commodity. And so there's a level of confidence you can have as a distributor. Once you sell an item, you're going to keep it in there. So I'm a big fan of private label and what it can do for vendors. And there's different ways to approach that to ensure you lock that business in. And you know, Pam and I, that was our job, really, work with vendors to get private label. When we worked for the distributor, let me clarify, work with vendors to get items into private label that we feel are going to have great odds of success. And you know, we were pretty good at that. So and then
Good.
the other things, you know, we need to make sure they're aware of how much safety stock do they need to have, especially if you're importing product. And the supply chain being so long on imported product, you really need to plan ahead, make sure you have enough safety stock in the US. One of the things I tell people is don't run out, because every time you run out of product, every time you don't fill an order, it gives somebody an opportunity to come in there and knock you out. And this is a very competitive business. Most operators, the independent ones in particular, they'll have 2, maybe 3 distributors coming in that can service a product. So you need to make sure you're on top of your business consistently.
Those are great points. Thank you, Rich. I don't know if there's any other question from the audience, or Doug, if you have any other comment.
Are there any questions from the audience? I don't see any hands raised. Any questions? I have a question, and there's maybe time for one more after my, hopefully fairly quick. You work with primarily U.S. companies for the U.S. market. When one of those, or that's maybe a statement that hopefully is true, for in those cases when they say, hey, we'd also like distribution in Mexico or Canada or country X, what do you do with them? How do you refer them to? Do you have a network that's global, or how do you process that request?
Yeah, so the Canada US part's pretty easy, Doug, and it's challenging for us beyond that.
Okay, got it. So do you have networks both in Canada and Mexico?
Yeah, we have folks. Canada's easy to do business in. You know, I've worked for a couple of Canadian companies over the years, and that's really pretty easy. Mexico takes a little different angle, and yeah, we can help with that.
Okay, I see Christian Aguirre, Global Chamber Hermosillo, and he's involved with the food industry. Hopefully you guys have already connected. I don't know, Christian, are you on the road, or I know you were going to be in Phoenix this week. Do you have any comments, or I know you kind of had a chance to just jump in. Did you have any questions or thoughts?
Hello, hi, Doc. Yes, I'm in Phoenix right now visiting family, but there have been a lot of interesting events going on. And it's good to see Rich again. Rich joined us about a couple of weeks ago when I had the opportunity to talk a little bit about True Salt. And I just found out that this webinar was going to take place, and it was very interesting for me to join and to learn a little bit more, because my role in True Salt is more logistics from Mexico, making sure the product arrives in Phoenix or the product arrives from Baja into San Diego. But learning a little bit about more about food service is very interesting, and I'm very sure I'm going to be reaching out to Rich and maybe try to do an introduction with True Salt.
Great. Yeah, I loved your presentation. I learned a ton. In fact, we were just down in Cabo, and I was looking at the salts in the grocery store, trying to understand. I don't speak Spanish or read it, so it's a little challenging for me.
Okay. Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you, Pamela and Scott. It was very, very interesting to learn on that side of business, because I'm not that involved in it. I know we obviously work with food service and more, but it was great to learn a little bit more.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Really phenomenal information. Appreciate it. I see Demos on the call as well, and I know you know the food industry really well in Europe. Did you have any reaction to what you saw today? Do you have a moment to say hi? And if not,
Definitely. I'm sorry, I have issues with my camera. I'm not going to be seen today. Thank you very much, Doug. Very interesting presentation and perspective of the US market. I should be in touch with the gentleman there and the lady, so to explore possible cooperation.
fantastic.
Thank you.
Recently spoke about the Europe market. So thank you very much. Let me turn it over to Cesar to close the room. Cesar, I know we have another Globinar here starting in a few minutes as well. Do you want to make any final comments? Thank you to all the speakers today, Rich, Pamela, and everybody at the team. Really appreciate the knowledge and what you've got. Scott as well. Cesar, you want to close us?
Sure. Thank you, Doug. And again, thank Rich. As you know, we like to keep food always around our event, and we plan to keep it that way. I think we're doing something on wine as the next one. Still we don't have a date, but we'll keep you posted on that, and trying to do more with friends given the Olympics. So definitely keep you posted. And Pamela, Scott, pleasure meeting you. Rich is a really good representative of the company, and he's always supporting our events, and we're happy to support as much as we can as well. So yes, we have another event just back to back. It's going to be on AI and language translation. So if that happens to be an interest, feel free to join. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
All the best.
Take care.
Cheers.
Thank you.